What's up guys, welcome back to another piece of long form content. This time on a bit of an instructional for 3 plyometrics I think all boxers should be doing. Get a lot of questions about plyos and I thought it'd just be best to break down 3 types of plyometric variations I think are going to be the most important for boxers. Ultimately the aim with plyometrics is to improve your power and reactivity or your reactive strength. Basically reactive strength is how well you can respond to the ground and produce force. When we think about this from a boxing standpoint, the aim is to be faster and more reactive than your opponent. So along with this, plyometrics are also going to be important from a motor coordination and energy efficiency standpoint, and they can also be protective against injury. So this is why plyometrics are going to be so important to include into your strength and conditioning program. So like I said, I'm going to go through 3 different plyometric variations that I think all boxers should be doing. If you like this type of content, make sure you like and subscribe, and hit me up in the comments if you want to see more of this. So I'm just going to go through some low amplitude pogos. Everyone would have done some sort of similar action to these or even done these before, but I like these as a good introductory plyometric, but working through, I guess, the calf complex. A little bit of the knees, but mostly through that calf complex, ankle complex. But good thing about pogos is they're infinitely scalable, so you can go through, increase the intensity of it, increase the complexity of it. There's a few different ways to do it, but nice introductory way to plyometrics is just through a low amplitude pogo. But what we're looking for is toes up right before you hit the ground, just so you activate that muscle before you're getting into the contact with the ground. And we're looking to get off the ground nice and quick, so not spending too long on the ground. I said before, one of the easiest ways to progress plyometrics or pogos is basically just adding some intensity or adding some intent. So I'm going to go through an intensive version of just a bilateral pogo, but similar to our low amplitude version, we're still trying to get off the ground nice and quick, but this time we're just adding a bit of intent to it, so really attacking the ground and just trying to push some force into that ground. So next pogo variation I'm going to go through is basically a split stance. So same ideas behind it, in that we're trying to get off the ground nice and quick, trying to preload that muscle through lifting the toes up before the contact. But what I mean by split stance is that literally just one foot in front of the other, just loading one side more than the other. Adding another layer of complexity, we can switch the feet, just so we can really teach ourselves to get ready for that ground contact and preload that muscle. So again, I'll show you just a little variation of that. So when someone's proficient at just body weight pogos, one way we can overload it or increase the intensity and complexity of it is just adding some light dumbbells. What this does is just increases your time on the ground, but the intent should still be there to try and get off the ground nice and quick. So like the variation I showed before, with the split stance, we're going to be alternating in the air, just loading one side a bit more than the other on each rep. But yeah, same intent should be there, but yeah, the dumbbells will just slow you down a little bit. I'm going to move on to some continuous jumps, but these are pretty much just for pure power output. So we know with boxing that the more powerful your legs are, the more powerful your punches are, more efficient you'll be able to move around the ring. It's then going to lead to you having more energy efficiency. But like I said, these are for pure power output. So different to our pogo variations where we're trying to get off the ground nice and quick. The continuous jumps, you'll spend a little bit more time on the ground, which gives you the opportunity to then produce a lot more force and a lot more power. So I think pogo variations are more for that reactive strength, reacting to the ground very quickly, whereas the continuous jumps are more for pure power output. So a couple of different variations we're going to go through are some continuous broad jumps, some hurdle jumps, and some continuous counter movement jumps. And then like we did with the pogos, we can add a bit more complexity or just load them up a little bit with some light dumbbells. So just showed you some continuous broad jumps, working through what we call like a horizontal vector. And now we're going to go through more of a vertical vector. So I'd say my strategy in horizontal jumps or continuous broad jumps are more like a hip dominant, so really emphasizing those glutes. But when I'm going through some continuous counter movement jumps in that vertical action, I use a bit more of a quad dominant strategy. So yeah, there's a bit of nuance, but whether there's actually too much difference between actually producing power or just getting those legs powerful, there's probably not heaps for boxers, but they can be slightly different, also depending on the levers of the person, so how tall or how short they are. Might be suited to one versus the other, but yeah, can use Continuous broad jumps, we're working that horizontal vector, or continuous counter movement jumps, working more of that vertical vector. So an easy way just to progress our continuous counter movement jumps is just adding some dumbbells. There's probably a bit of contention in the strength and conditioning world around loaded jumps and whether you should actually do them or not to get powerful, or whether you should just do heavy lifting and plyos. I'm kind of in the middle ground. I like to do both to enhance your power output. These are just another way to, I guess, surf that force velocity curve, working through pure velocity to pure strength and kind of everywhere in between. But like I said, just an easy way to progress those counter movement jumps, but nothing too heavy. I just got 7 kilos, so about 20% of my body weight. So yeah, just some continuous jumps like we did before, but this time holding the dumbbells. So one of the final progressions for our continuous jumps is some continuous hurdle jumps. These ones basically combine some ideas from our Pogo variations and our continuous jumps. So what I mean by that is that with the hurdle jumps, we're still trying to produce loss of force so we can get ourselves over that hurdle. But with the constraint of the hurdle, it also means that we don't have as much time to produce force. So we're trying to get off the ground nice and quick, similar to our Pogo variations. Moving on to some lateral variations. The reason we do lateral variations for boxers is that in boxing, you want to be efficient in the ring and how you move. So a lot of your movement will be laterally and side to side. So overloading that specific movement with these lateral variations will hopefully mean that you're more efficient in that movement and you're able to produce more force and be more powerful in those changes of directions. You know, evading punches, slipping, rolling, getting into a better position to punch where we have to move laterally. This is the reason that we do those lateral variations. But 3 variations we're going to go through continuous lateral bounds, and then we're going to overload that with a med ball, similar to what we did with those continuous vertical jumps. And then just a banded variation, which I'll show you last. So similar to our previous variations that we were talking about, once someone's become proficient in body weight variations, we can start to add some load, increase the complexity or the intensity of it. But like I mentioned with the other variations, what the load also does is slows us down just a little bit, just to give us a bit more time to produce force, and that can also increase our power output. So one thing I forgot to mention with our continuous lateral bounds without the med ball is that with our lateral bounds, you should really be focusing pushing off the inside foot rather than reaching with that outside foot. It's the inside leg that's really doing all the work. But with our continuous bounds with the med ball, what we're looking for is that every time we land onto that leg, the med ball is coming over to that same side, loads that leg, and then we can propel out of it onto the other side. Final variation for the lateral variations is a banded lateral bound. What the band is doing is that it's pulling us in quicker than what we would be used to. That means we have less time to prepare for the ground. What we need is more muscle pre-activation, and then we have to push really hard out of it against the resistance.